Welcome to the Real Estate Reserve podcast, number one real estate investing podcast in the whole wide world. I'm Jason Balin from Hard Money Bankers, and sitting across from me, Ian Horowitz from Equity Warehouse. What's up today, Ian?
No, man, just got back from the gym. I was rushing across the Beltway, getting ready to do the number one podcast in the whole wide world. I want to make sure I had a nice, good pump because we got a badass guest today. I know a lot of people think the end of the world's coming, but I think now's the time more than ever, the same way we talked about COVID, is to get in and grow your real estate portfolio. Now's the time to get in there and scale it correctly. What's going on with you? Anything good?
Same old, same old. I'm excited to hear about, to learn a little bit more about Scott and what his team offers. Obviously, anything related to business growth, business automation, that's a sexy topic for me. It might not be a sexy topic for everybody else, but I like to see how different businesses are run, what's recommended related to structuring. The beauty of real estate investing in general is you can be kind of a one-man, one-woman band, or you can have a full-blown operation. And there is a lot of real estate investors out there that do a lot of volume that you'd be very surprised that their operation might not be as big as you might think. And they might not have a gigantic overhead, although it looks like they might. They might be doing lots and lots of transactions, but they've put systems and people and processes and automation in place to be extremely profitable.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, when I rode out to Cleveland earlier this year, John Farling, who we had on the show a few times, said, "Hey man, let's go to this event." I'm like, "Dude, I don't got time for an event. I don't feel like driving to Cleveland. It's so far away. I'm not a fan of the state of Ohio." Anyway, my dumbass got in the car and I drove out there, and I left with some really ridiculously good nuggets. And one of the speakers at Tim Brotz's mastermind event that he hosted at his office was Scott Hanis. And he got up there and he talked about company organization charts. He's one of Tim Brotz's trusted vendors who handles their HR. And it was a really good exercise to walk through it. And Jay, I know you told me to do some similar stuff. I haven't done it. And then I heard Scott talk and I was like, damn it, I need to do this. So let's bring Scott in and talk about some good things here.
Scott, how are you?
Doing great, Jason. Doing great, Ian. That was an awesome intro to your podcast. I just have to tell you, that was amazing. I was like jamming out in the background a little bit.
Yeah.
Very, very cool stuff, guys.
You just crank the volume up, and you can get everybody off their seats ready to freaking jam and get excited. So
let's go.
Appreciate
LFG, like Ian's got on his tag there. LFG, let's go.
Yeah, man, let's go. And that's the thing is that like a lot of people, like Jason was saying, though, is like, and we're going to get right into it. We'll let you introduce yourself here in a second. There's too many guys are like, yeah, let's go. And then they're the one-man band and they chokehold their whole business. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why your topic, like sometimes like insurance and some other ones aren't super sexy, but this is where businesses are created. And you helped Tim Brotz scale to an insane level to where they're at now. So why don't you give everybody a quick background and we'll dive into some of these things.
Absolutely. Again, thank you both. Appreciate it. So Scott Hanis, I own a company called Fortitude HR Solutions. We do HR consulting and we do recruiting all across the U.S. with clients. Got started in the business about 3 years ago. Prior to doing this, I worked for a private equity firm where I was a VP of HR. Prior to that, I did international HR work. I was a director of HR for the Americas region. So I spent anywhere from a week to 2 weeks either in Mexico, Brazil, or the U.S., putting in best practices and just building high-performing teams and really trying to move the needle. And to your point, we can talk about it or we can be about it. And I love talking about it, but then also kind of drawing out the roadway or the map on how to get to where you want to go. And that all takes action. It takes hard work. It doesn't like you don't get to snap your finger and automatically it's going to happen for you. You got to put in the time and the energy and the effort. I've been in human resources for 17 years. Live here in Cleveland, Ohio. I know, Ian, you said you didn't like Ohio in the beginning. I was chuckling at that as well. I love Ohio. I love the people. I even love the weather most days. I don't love our sports teams because we won't talk about that. So we can have a whole therapy session about Cleveland sports teams. Congratulations to your Ravens, Ian, for beating our Browns on Sunday. So
I'm actually a Philly boy, so I'm kind of living high on the hog, and Jason's down in DC, so he's got to deal with DC sports, but I grew up in Philly, and right now it's an okay place to be. So
yeah, you guys got a good team. Good team.
Yeah.
Good team.
Go ahead, Joe.
So let's start with the beginning of some of the terms that you used earlier, and obviously HR, human resources. I think when people hear the word human resources, they think of corporate America and hey, there's I have an HR department. I'm just a one man real estate investor, or I have a team of real estate agents, or whatever the case is. Why would I need HR? What's kind of the first step with this? I guess with business foundation and structure, is it putting together some sort of like organizational chart to determine you having the operation, and you as a solopreneur or maybe with a few partners or whatever, just because you're one person or two people doesn't mean that you need to wear hats of multiple parties.
Mm-hmm.
Like how is kind of like that structure put in place first?
Yeah, I mean, to me, Jason, great question. To me, I think it really comes down to, first off, knowing kind of what you stand for, putting your core values, that to me is your very bottom line of foundation, right? Understanding what you stand for, what you're about. Kind of, if you've read Simon Sinek, he's a great leadership expert, but like, what's your why? Really know that, define who you are as an organization. And then from there, like, I think you need to know kind of, what are your goals? Where do you want to be in the next year, the next 3 years? I think if you go past 3 years, it's really tough to predict things. You may have a pie in the sky dream of where you want to be, but I think you need to know where you're going the next 12 months minimum. And then from there, again, even if you're a solopreneur, you're doing everything on your own, you have to know that you can do way more when you have a team of people, right? There's the power of you not doing all the different tasks and responsibilities of a business. To me, there's $10 items in a business. There's $100 items. There's $1,000 and $10,000 items. If I'm truly a business owner and I want to grow and succeed and really build a true business, I'm going to focus on the $1,000 and $10,000 item all day long. Like, I'm going to be joining Ian at a mastermind here in November. Like, I'm not booking my flight. I'm not booking my hotel. I have someone else that's doing that for me. That's not a $1,000 or a $10,000 item that I should be spending my time on. But the whole point of that is, you can build people and you can put like an organizational chart together. But again, you got to know where you're going as an organization with your goals and objectives. So, if you're in real estate and you got, you maybe only have 50, storage units right now, and you want to have 1,000 in the next 3 years. How do you reverse engineer that number? How do you quantify that? You need to know your buying criteria, where you're going to buy those units. You need to understand like what your economic opportunities are for those, units that you're purchasing. And then you got to figure out, what do I need on my team that I need to keep internally? And then who do I maybe want to outsource with? If you read the book, The Who, Not the How, I mean, again, it doesn't need to be you doing everything. You can have third-party contractors. You can have third-party vendors that you work with. Or to me, if you really want to build a more sustainable business long-term where you control, again, what people are doing and what hours they're working on and what efforts they're spending time on, really, I'm going to spend time going into, hiring full-time W-2 employees that I can say, okay, I need you to show up Monday through Friday. We work 8 to 5. We may work some evenings and weekend hours. Here's your goals and expectations. Here's your job description. Here's what our culture is all about. Let's go get it. If you don't have that stuff in place, I think it makes it real hard. Too many times I see solo entrepreneurs or business leaders that, they want to get involved in this business and this business and this business. And I just came back from a mastermind in Nashville with about 200 people. And at the end of the day, like, we talked a lot about shiny object syndrome. And I would say a lot of entrepreneurs have that. That's a real thing. So, coming into this fun economic times we have, just like COVID, which Ian mentioned earlier, it's all about focus, knowing what you're good at. What is your strength that you bring to the world and to your business, creating more value and more opportunities, and really staying in that lane. I don't think you need to veer off and go 3 lanes over. Focus on what you're good at, attack that. If the market changes, then adapt and adjust to the market. But you don't need to go ahead and start 12 new businesses, even if the opportunity looks good. You will make more money focusing on what you're good at versus going and starting an e-com store and go doing crypto and go doing this. Like, focus on what you're good at, especially in these types of times right now, and then leverage those relationships you have and the opportunities. Look at your market share. I'm going off on a tangent, guys. Sorry. Look at your market share. Look at your market share. Who do you do business with? Check your P&L on a monthly basis. Where do you spend your money? Where can you invest more money? When you invest in people and you invest in marketing, that's where you get your highest return on investment all day long. As long as you lead people the right way. You can't just say, here's your job, go do it. You got to engage with people. You have to give them clear expectation. You got to communicate. You can't just let people be thrown to the wolves. If that happens and they fail, it's not their fault necessarily. It's your fault as a leader. You need to look in the mirror and say, what the heck did I do wrong? And what can I do better next time I hire somebody?
Dude, that was just that was an AP class in business in general, right? Like you covered a lot of ground, but it's a lot of ground and it's hard for people to digest, right? Like it's one thing to talk about it, and like you said, it's another thing to execute.
Yep.
And I want to talk about goals and visions and how they relate to your business. But I think the first biggest problem, and Jason, I think you would agree, Jason deals a lot with house flippers, people are doing rental portfolios, a lot of smaller operations sometimes. He deals with a lot of sophisticated guys, but a lot of smaller operations as well. Is we see a lot of guys that are like, hey, I'm creating this real estate portfolio, and then it's like it is a one-man band, and they only concentrate, like they're always pulling the levers. And I thought one of the unique things that you talked about when you were building an org chart was actually having your key vendors on your organization chart. And I think that helps one-man band operations execute at a higher level to build themselves out. Because, I'll be honest with you, and I think something we're going to talk about at the mastermind is what's the true definition of success? Well, to me, the true definition of business success is a business that lives and breathes on its own and can run without my own manipulation in it, right? So I think talking about that key vendors there, like what could someone that's like a solopreneur, like a smaller operation, how can they envision growing their business if they don't want a massive hired help team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, first off, again, you could hire a virtual assistant, a VA, a virtual professional to take on some of your executive assistant type tasks, your admin, day-to-day things, like booking a flight, for example, answering emails, time blocking, those things. Again, I said about like you get a high return on your investment if you do marketing. So you could outsource and have someone else do your third-party marketing, your social media content, creating videos, those kind of things. You could hire a third-party team member to still show up on your org chart. And, again, same thing. If you get into like payroll, you could go through a payroll company. You can use an accounting firm to help with bookkeeping and your accounts payable and your accounts receivable. But again, they're still part of your team, even though they don't report only directly to you. They may report to 5 other people because they're their own independent contractors. They're still part of your team and your services. And I think, Ian, you said something really, really important. When we start a business, sometimes we only think about the business and we work too much, in the business, and we don't work on the business. And at the end of the day, and that's a cliche saying, a lot of people say it, but in 5 years, like if I was to die, who's going to take over my company? What does my organization look like? Or in 5 years, let's say I want to sell the company. What is my exit strategy? What is my business really worth? If you want to build a really, good business that's successful, that's making money, that treats their people well, shows respect, at the end of the day, you're going to put a team of people around you to be successful. So I think, those are things that I would be doing if I'm a solopreneur. I would leverage, certain people, relationships, again, look at virtual assistants. If you were to say, Scott, who do I hire first? I would hire an executive assistant or an office assistant all day first. People, when you say the term executive assistant, that usually comes at a higher price point in the market from a job title, like wages, salary standpoint. So you may want to call it an office assistant or an office admin. Create the role, know what those responsibilities and duties are. When I work with a new client and I'm meeting all their team members, we'll do what's called a task responsibility worksheet. And everybody for an entire week, and they always hate me. They're like, Scott, you're nothing but a Toby, right? I'm not Toby from The Office. I think Ian can attest that. I like to have fun, right, Ian?
Yeah,
not Toby. Yes. But I think at the end of the day, like I want to know, how do my team members spend their time? And it's not to micromanage them, but when someone gets to like 80% capacity, they're pretty much at capacity. They're not going to be able to handle much more. So do I need to go hire someone else? Do I need to change around responsibilities? And then I also will use that stuff if they create it like for an entire week, Monday through Friday, 15, 30-minute increments. And I'll ask them to write down everything that they do. Is there stuff that we can outsource? Is there stuff that I should be doing? Like if I'm a solopreneur, my highest, best use of my time is probably in real estate, finding deals, maybe raising money, closing on those deals. Maybe they're reaching out to Jason. Hopefully they're reaching out to Jason for money. That's a good plug for you, Jason. You like that shameless plug? Doing those kind of things in order to make sure that, again, that they're closing deals and bringing revenue in. Because if they bring revenue in consistently and they look at their P&L, the profit and loss statement, then they can go out and hire additional team members to grow their team that are full-time W-2 employees.
Yeah, that's all good stuff. So I remember years ago, I mean, we've run our hard money company for the last 16 years. And for some reason, early on, we knew to put together some sort of organizational chart. And I'm not exactly sure where we learned that from, but we didn't have any background in business or anything like that. So we must have read it somewhere. And I remember, I don't know, it was just myself, my business partner, Chris, and we literally brainstormed of everything: CEO, COO, marketing, underwriting, processing, capital raising, came up with 20 or 25 things. And then our next job was like, cool, who's going to do what? And it was literally, I think a lot of people don't do organizational charts to begin with because they're like, well, I don't have 5 employees or 10 employees or this. It's just me. It's like, great. Well, highlight your name next to all of those darn things and then figure out in the future, hey, which one do you hate doing the most? I hate doing bookkeeping, right? Great. What are we going to do about that? Can you outsource that? Can you get a vendor? Like, you mentioned earlier, you put your vendors on there, or do you hire an employee? So one common thing, and I know how we set this up early on, but I'm curious of your opinion, because I think a lot of people, especially real estate investors, would benefit from this advice, would be when hiring somebody, and I agree with what you said, hire some sort of executive assistant or some sort of assistant at the beginning. Do you recommend hiring someone that's like the jack of all trades? Because what happens is there's a lot of individual tasks for real estate investors. Like, let's call it bookkeeping, answering the phone, doing mail, things like that. And a lot of these tasks have overlapping personality types. So for instance, someone who's front facing typically isn't the best bookkeeper, at least in my experience, right? Because you have an I personality and then you have like some sort of C personality type. But when you start out and they're spending money to hire somebody to help them, they can't hire 2 or 3 different people. They may only have a budget to hire one. Do you recommend hiring that one person and sticking them into stuff that they're good at, or having them kind of be the jack of all trades and helping out in different parts of the business?
It's a great question. And I love that you use the DISC personality assessment. That's the only one that I really like out of the 60 or so that are out there. So I think it depends on your leadership style, to be very blunt, Jason. Like, if you don't know how to manage people, or you can't lead people, and you're not good at giving clear direction and expectations, then you probably need to hire the person that's going to do that one specific task that they're good at. You can hire people that can do multiple things, but I would be very upfront with that person. Be like, hey, like, we're a growing company. You're a first hire. You're going to wear many hats. Here's what the expectations are. Like, because again, if you communicate things, like, people will either live up or live down to expectations. When you don't communicate things clearly, they're not going to know what you need. And I would argue, like, if you're trying to get someone to do marketing, bookkeeping, do sales, and do customer service, you have some that will overlap, but typically a bookkeeper's personality is much different than a marketing personality. So then you're looking for like the purple squirrel or the purple unicorn, and it doesn't really exist readily available out there in the marketplace, right? So I think you got to look at internally first, what type of leader am I? How much time am I willing to devote to training that person? What type of resources am I going to give them? And if I need them to be all 3, then I need to tell them that up front. Like, you're going to do all 3. It's not going to be permanent. It's not going to be long-term. As we grow the business, what do you love doing the most? We'll try to keep you in that lane, but we're going to have you help until we get some additional pieces into the organization. And I love what you said too, Jason. Like, Traction talks about it. If you've read EOS, the Traction model, like, when you draw out your org chart, you may put your name in 12 boxes initially. But if you know what those tasks and responsibilities are, again, that's when you can decide, what's my next hire? Do I want to outsource? Do I want to hire W-2? Do I want to partner with somebody? You have a lot of different options. But when you don't map that out, you're running from a place of chaos, quite frankly. Like, you're all over the place as a business owner, and you don't know what the next step is. And yeah, your bank account may be positive, but it doesn't mean that's sustainable long-term.
Yeah, no, dude, that is awesome. And I want to build on that. And I'm just want to let you know, I think I need another pen for the mastermind when you come, because I'll be sitting there taking a lot more notes. When you're hiring, right? Like, in a lot of people, I come from, as you know, the fire department. Leadership skills are there, sometimes under pressure, but then there's also a lot of leaders that you watch them promote through the ranks. And then all they do is, when they get to the next rank, they just manage from the last rank that they were in. They're like, well, this is what I used to do every day, so I'm going to continue to do that. I just get paid more now, right? How do you create good goals or for your employees, or become a better leader? Because they kind of work hand in hand. And I guess the one answers the question, but how do you create good goals for your employees as you're making these hires, or good goals for your key vendors that you're working hand in hand with every day, to be able to measure what's going on to make sure that you're getting what you're looking for from who you've hired?
That's a great question. I think a lot of times it starts again with you as the leader. I like to invest in my team. You know, a lot of like the more you put into your team, I think the more you're going to get out of it, right? It's kind of like if you give, the more you typically receive back. And so like I'm a big believer in like self-development. That's why I go to mastermind events. That's why I listen to podcasts. That's why I read books. Like if your area is leadership and you're promoting somebody because they're maybe good technically, but they don't have the leadership skills, then you as the owner of that business or that manager or leader, you need to train that person to move up to the next ladder, right? And again, I think leadership can be taught. Not everybody wants to be a leader though. There comes a lot of responsibility. There comes a lot of pressure, just like you talked about, like in the fire, house and the stuff that you did. But again, I think we have to equip people to be prepared with tools and resources. So again, like if you haven't read anything by Simon Sinek, read Simon Sinek. What's Your Why? He writes a great book called Leaders Eat Last. You can listen to it on podcasts. Listening to a lot of stuff from like Jim Rohn, ROHN, like the 12 Pillars book. That's an amazing book. You can listen to it for free on YouTube. Anything by John Maxwell, Ken Blanchard, like the stuff that really prepares you for how to be a good leader, I think is important. And then when I do like goal setting with my clients, so I'm actually driving to Columbus, Ohio tonight. Sorry, it's still in Ohio, Ian. It's not out of state.
Well, you go visit Farling. He's right down there.
Yeah, well, I should hit up John. I'm going to be down there. With that, I am I want the entire executive team in a room together and I want to collaborate with them. Yeah, this is our top line goal, or we may have like top 5 goals. And what are those activities underneath those goals? Because our goals and objectives as the owners of the business, they need to cascade down to everybody else on the team. So for example, you have a revenue goal of $5 million for 2023. That should be on, like if I have an acquisitions team member or a sales team member, that should be on their goals as well. If I have an operations person, it should be on their goals as well. And then if I have other people underneath those 2 roles, they're also going to be aligned. So everything cascades down, everything's aligned. All my I's are dotted, all my T's are crossed. And then I want to get collaboration and feedback. Like when I set goals with clients, or when I did this in the corporate world, we would do SMART goals. I'm sure you heard that acronym before. So very specific, measurable, attainable, achievable, relevant, or results oriented. And then what's the time behind it? And they have to be quantifiable. It can't just be like when you first set goals, they might be yes and no kind of things. But if I say I want to, generate $5 million in revenue by December of 2023, that's very quantifiable. Did I do it or not? And then you could break that bigger goal down into sub goals. Like goals are typically, longer term focus, like 3 to 5. Objectives are typically shorter term, like 1 to 3, if you read the true definition of those. And then I could take that bigger goal and I can break it down into micro goals and say, okay, in order to do $5 million of revenue, I need to do $600,000 of revenue each month. And then what do I need to do each week? And what do I need to do each day? And then I want to constantly look at those as part of my metrics for leading and lagging indicators to see how I'm performing. And if I'm managing people, to your point, Ian, like how do I become a better leader? I'm going to sit down with that team member once a month minimum and say, okay, this is what you're excelling in. You're doing this really well. This is where I see you need some area for improvement. Here's how you're tracking towards your goals and objectives. Here's how you're tracking towards your KPIs. What resources do you need from me as your leader? Like, how can I help you? And then just talk about those things. And then, I have big ears for a reason. You can't see them on the screen, but they stick out. So I want to ask people questions and I want to listen to them. Like, what do they need from me? Like, I'm all about like being a servant leader and giving back and helping my team, because the stronger my team is, the stronger I'm going to be as a leader and the stronger my company is going to be.
And I think as you grow, a lot of people, sorry, Jay, a lot of people think it's like, oh, I grew, I still get to do the deals and I still get to do this. Well, sometimes it's like, well, you put an acquisitions manager in place or a capital raiser in place. Your job is to support that person, not so much going in there and grinding every day. We used to always say, when you were a rookie, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason, right? Like you got to sit back and learn and listen and lead from that position. Sorry, go ahead, Jay.
No, all good. Keep it going.
I mean, dude, it's really good information, right? Because like a lot of people, sorry, I'm going to go on another rant. I got 1 mouth, but I like to use it a lot. But it's like, dude, a lot of people don't want to talk about this. They're like, oh, and here's a good one. And I was talking to Jason about this earlier, is like a a lot of people are like, oh, my employees, they don't want to work as hard as me, or they don't want to do this. But really it is, they don't have a set expectation from their leader. So then they're just floundering and they don't know the direction you're going or the company's going. And most employees, they want to know, hey, give me a task. I want to complete it for you because I want to be a part of this team and I want to help the company succeed. Right.
Yep. Well,
Yeah,
and if you know what your why is and you share that and you're promoting that and you're telling people what your vision is at all the times, like they're going to want to buy into that, especially if you're doing it for a greater good and you're trying to help other people. Like, again, if you're showing up late to work every day and you're the leader, yeah, it's my company. I can do what I want. But what you permit is what you promote. So your people are watching you. Your team is focused on you. And if you're late every day, don't expect them to show up to work on time every day because they're not going to do it. And quite frankly, they shouldn't. I mean, you're setting that poor example. So you got to lead by the example. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Clean shave policy at our company, as you can tell.
Hey, you do what you want. But again, that's part of your culture. That's the beauty of owning your own business. No one's going to tell Ian, you got to shave completely like your face every day. You can't have any 5 o'clock shadow. That's your call. You own the company. That's a beautiful thing. Sorry, Jason.
Yeah. No, it's all right. I'm just hopping in. And one thing that, you always hear real estate investors, and I know we're bringing this back to real estate investing a bunch just because that's a lot of our viewers and our followers, is it's almost like be careful what you wish for, because kind of bringing back the initial conversation to where you're talking about now, because like a lot of the things you just discussed, I can just like hear and see people cringing, being like, I don't want to do all that. I just want to flip houses, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. I just want to buy this building. And that's okay if that's what you want to do. You got to figure out, like what you said, what's your why? Like, what do you really want to do? I mean, I remember early on after we started hiring employees, we had about, 10 W-2s, W-2s and some 1099s, but we were like, I don't want to hire employees. Like, I just want this to be us. This is going to be a pain in the neck. Like, we originally thought, hey, we should, because they would help us. And then when you're not properly managing, it just backfires, right? Because all of a sudden it's like, now it's hurting because you would put the wrong people in place. You're not managing correctly. You don't know what the heck you're doing. But I think that's kind of a speed bump that a lot of people run into, because these real estate investors, they'll come in, they'll flip some houses, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, I can do, I've done 5 of these. I want to do 100 of these next year. Well, be careful what you wish for, because what your business looks like doing 5 deals that you can probably do in your sleep by yourself is completely different. You're not going to look at the properties anymore. You're not, GC in the projects. You got much higher level stuff, like you said earlier, $1,000 or $10,000 things, like creating marketing campaigns, hiring employees, things like that, all proactive types of things. But I think the transition that a lot of folks have is they're reluctant to grow because they're scared to potentially take on new people. They're like, I don't want to hire employees. It's the pain in the neck. But then after they get over that speed bump and after they get over that mountain, they're like, you know what? This is great. You hire the right people, you put the right systems and processes in place, you have the right team. They agree with your why. They their goals and your goals are aligned. And all of a sudden it's a higher standard. It's a higher power. You're not just doing this to make some money for yourself. You're doing this to make money for, your entire operation, your employees, your staff, your vendors, your community, and everything else. And it's just a much higher level that I think a lot of people probably don't understand unless they've been there, because you can't, right? Like it takes time to get to that level. So it's kind of an interesting concept how that kind of all full circles.
Well, and I would say, just to piggyback off what you said, Jason, like, and even I said this earlier, if you like doing deals and that's all you want to do is do deals, then go hire an operations person to run the day-to-day stuff. Just because you own the company doesn't mean you have to be the CEO. Like I have other clients that, like I have a client that I'm working with right now. They don't want to be the CEO anymore. They're like, Scott, I want to hire a CEO. I don't like it. I like doing marketing. I like finding deals and I like building relationships. Well, great. Well, we'll create a different role for you. We'll hire the CEO. They'll run the business, but you just need to give them the autonomy and you have to empower them to actually make decisions and be the person that's leading the effort and the charge. If you can do that as an owner, you can take yourself out of the CEO role. The other thing that you said, and I really liked it, like if you have predictable process and systems, and this is where the automation stuff comes in. If you have good standard operating procedures, good key performance indicators, where you kind of have like a heartbeat or a pulse of the organization, and you have good people that are in your day-to-day operation, it's going to give you your time back. And that's what a lot of entrepreneurs want. We don't want to work 150 hours a week. We want to have people that are going to help us, and we want to be able to get our time to spend with our family or our friends or whatever hobbies we might have. And so, like, again, having those systems, processes in place. And if you're not sure even how to start writing standard operating procedures, turn on Zoom or Loom and start recording yourself talking while you're doing things. Document it that way. And when you go to hire people, you can be like, hey, like, marketing person, document everything that you do. You don't even have to be the one that creates all the SOPs. You can have your employees or your team members creating all those documents for you.
That's, and that's how we did it, because we fell, and I don't want to say fell into the trap. Like, this was actually a good thing that happened, but we had, some of these businesses, as you're growing, you don't know how to grow it. Right. So you put the right person in place, and, I hate to say it, but sometimes they learn that job themselves, and they can obviously do it significantly better than you just because it was a startup. So it's like, I want to train you, I want to lead you, I want to help you, I want to enable you, but I don't fully know. Like, for instance, we're going to onboard a new piece of software. I don't know the software. Right. And I don't necessarily need to learn it. Let them become the expert. And we caught ourselves, and I guess this is kind of a good thing going back, as we've had some of our employees exit between, getting married or, moving up, or, some small businesses, if you find a kick-ass employee, like, you're going to want them to leave because they're going to potentially outgrow. You don't really want them to leave, but that's the best decision for you, for them. And we've had that happen to us. And because it's like, listen, like, I can't pay you $200,000 a year. Like, you've already to the max of like what this business is capable of doing. So we encourage you to move on. And by doing so, they help build out the whole process. They helped onboard the next person. Hey, what are things that you do? What are things that you think that we need? We have questions, that we could be involved in, things like that. So I always feel like most people, and maybe this is more small businesses, they think there's the dictator, they think it's like the employee and the boss, and there's no employee and there's boss. And we've never had any C-level executives. We've never had anything. Like, we're all equals. Like, we all have our own role. So I don't know. I think different people think different things. And I think maybe that was more old school as well, where it's like, hey, the boss comes and, they're demanded to do this. But if I'd encourage people, especially, go ahead.
That was a different generation. I mean, we saw it in the fire department too, right? Like, dude, you're talking about World War II Vietnam vets, where it was like, dude, it was like men commanding, right? Like, this is it. Don't talk shit to me. And like, there's no talk back. There's no collaborative. It's like, this man is right, and that's it. It was just a different generation to where we are today, right? Like, call it what you will. It is what it is. On the same side of that, Jay, kind of piggyback off you, is like, I think the thing everyone should take from the corporate world is the org chart, right? Like, I think corporate does that very, very well. We as entrepreneurs or smaller companies don't necessarily do that very well. And I think that's where people, if you don't write that down, you don't even know what you want to relinquish control with. And Scott, I would like to ask you, like, I know when we hired our first employee, it was like, oh, I'm going to be out of touch with my business and I'm worried about this. Like, how can business owners hire an employee and relinquish control where they don't feel like they don't know what's going on? Like, how do they stay in contact with their business so they still have that relationship? Because I think that's a big rub for a lot of smaller real estate operators.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear this as an entrepreneur, but I think like having discipline and like scheduled meetings and discussions, right? Like, so, I'm not like the biggest fan of Traction, but I mean, like, I've also worked for a $2 billion company, so it's a little bit different than Traction's methodologies. But like, daily huddle meetings are a good thing. Like, it gives you a pulse on what's going on. Reviewing your data and your metrics and your numbers is a good thing. Again, looking at the P&L, having a weekly leadership meeting, every, like in Traction, they'll call those level 10s, and reviewing that. I think those are good things to kind of get a pulse. Each department can tell you what's going on in their department or their role. They report out. I have some clients that do like an end of the week email from each employee or team member. I think that's a little bit overkill. Maybe that's what you need in the beginning, in order to make you feel secure about what's going on. But eventually, like, you're going to realize, like, if I have two people, and they're both working, 8 hours a day, that's 16 hours worth of work, versus if I'm trying to do it, and I'm working 16 hours, I'm going to get 8 hours of my time back, right? So I think those are big things to look at. And again, I think to me, it just, again, like regular conversations. And in the beginning, when you hire somebody, I think it's kind of like check and verify, that if you give someone a task, do they do it to your standards? If they didn't, you need to explain what your standards are, what you have done differently, and then check in. And that way the person knows what the expectation is. And then going forward, when they create a spreadsheet for you, you're going to make sure it's at this font or this, bolded, color or whatever you want in the spreadsheet. But if you don't clearly communicate that, you're always going to be nitpicking. You're always going to have the control issues, and you're always going to be wondering, I can just do this better. Why am I asking someone else to do it? But if you explain it, you communicate it, you have a process, and you give them time to really train and onboard and learn, that's when you're going to start seeing a lot of power from that, economies of scale and multiplying the team and having other people, doing those tasks and responsibilities and not you just doing all the work.
Yeah, it makes sense. So question for you. It's a little bit not related to small business or real estate investing, but where do you see kind of the workforce going? Obviously things have changed a lot over, since COVID. That's kind of the reason why. But, for instance, our employees, the expectation is they only come to the office twice a week and they work remote twice a week. And that's been a huge thing. And COVID was actually a good thing for us because it gave our entire operation the ability to work remote. Mm-hmm. And we didn't come to the office. I mean, it was COVID, and then there happened to be a flood and other stuff, but that's a different story. Point being is our entire operation can work remotely. It's set up to do so. Obviously, we like employees to come into the office. I like to come to the office. My business partner does as well. There's camaraderie. You can see each other. Sometimes, even though we use a lot of software and ways to communicate, sometimes it's just easier. It's good or bad, I guess. You can walk up to somebody, ask a question. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's bad. Sometimes it's just chat me the question or email me the questions. But in general, I'm actually really confused about what's going on in the workforce, not inside our operation, but in general, where a lot of retail operations can't hold employees, restaurants can't hold employees. The ones that do hold employees pay what I believe is a tremendous amount of money, $20+ an hour for, a college kid or a high school kid to work at, a Sky Zone or something like that. I'm curious to know, and we talk about this all the time, all these folks that left the workforce, where did they go? What are they expecting? And I mean, I think part of it is, hey, well, there's, I guess Gary Vee's world of, hey, a lot of these guys can do things digitally, be influencer on social media and stuff like that. But that's to me a small subset. I'm just curious, where it goes, because here's another example. Our most recent hire was about 6 months ago, and they had zero experience when they came in, but it was somebody that we've known for a long period of time that I trusted, and the experience didn't bother me. I wanted the right person to come in and we could teach the trade. And that was more important to us than anything else. But typically when we send out emails that we're hiring and things like that, we'll get hundreds of people that apply. We got very little, a dozen or something since COVID. And yeah, we found this great person and it worked out. But in general, I'm sure other businesses are having those challenges. So any insight related to what's happening in the workforce would be, I think, beneficial to everybody.
He asked you, so I don't give my political spin on it. So good luck.
Yeah, I will say it is a multifaceted problem, and it is a problem. I think that you have people right now that are, that have taken other jobs in other industries. So instead of fast food, Chick-fil-A is paying $20 an hour right now. I mean, to me, that's insane. I mean, I don't know if anybody worked in fast food that's watching, or if either one.
But that's a phenomenal company. That's a phenomenal company. And let's say whatever, let's use fast food, McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, all those other ones, or Chick-fil-A. There's a much higher purpose of community and everything else at Chick-fil-A. So I understand it. And what I'm personally seeing is all of those companies that offer the best of the best. You go, think about a restaurant that you go into and it's wow, this had great food. This had great service. This had great atmosphere. That doesn't happen in a lot of places anymore. So I can understand why the best of the best places are securing the best talent, but where's everybody else going?
Yeah. So without getting political, as Ian said, some people just don't want to work. So there's some laziness. I mean, and we already grew up, I think, in an entitled society. So there's some of that's there. I think you have some people that are genuinely still afraid of COVID or whatever else is out there. And some might have medical conditions that, make them feel that way. I mean, I almost died from COVID, and I think it's a garbage thing. So I won't go off any more other than saying that. I will also tell you that, some, because they're, being forced to work in different, roles, or they're different, places, childcare becomes still an issue. So that's a big, like, real legitimate reason. But I think if I'm trying to find talent now, like, it's not like you can post a job on Indeed and be done, or you can't just send out, like you said, Jason, an email and hope to get a bunch of people. I think it's, again, what's your story? What's your brand? What are you all about? What are your values? Telling everybody and their brother that you're hiring, asking people for referrals, paying referral bonuses to your team members, where if they make it 30 days, you're paying them $150. If they make it 90 days, you're paying them another $350, for example. So I think you got to get real creative. Like you hear in sales, always be closing. I will tell you right now, it's always be recruiting. Have your pipeline full, put your feelers out there. I love what you said, Jason, about, like, I think you can teach a lot of skills. It's not like we're rocket scientists or we're not heart surgeons here. We don't need all that formal education. But what do we need? What are our, tangible things that we need to have somebody to have? And what's intangible, and what can we train based upon the skill or the trade that they have? I think that's it. And I think a lot of people want to see career opportunity. Again, like before, it used to be like when I worked in manufacturing, we had somebody come in and we had people running a machine. But before they even got to that point, if they didn't have the skill set, because we were in a more rural area, we'd have them learn how to load and unload a machine, how to do quality checks, and that would pay a certain dollar amount. Then their next progression point, so if you can't see me draw this, but like an eye level position, L was where you were running a machine. So you can do beginner, intermediate, advanced operations, and there's different training competencies. And as they learn more, they're worth more to the organization, so you can pay them more. And that's what people want. Let's be honest. People always want to get paid more. And then if they're really good technically, they can become the U. And the U person is like on a CNC machine, for example, they're changing tool inserts, they're doing programming, they're helping in multiple cells of the organization. And then if they close it out, they can become the O. And that's really like a career development path. That O person, if they're good technically, we might invest in them, and they might go to engineering school and become like an engineer or a manufacturing engineer technician. But if they're really good with people, we might put them into leadership training and train them to be a supervisor. So I think companies have to think differently. We got to think outside the box. What does that person want? Everybody, when you interview somebody, should be, okay, what are your career goals? Where do you want to be in the next 1 to 3 years? Where do you want to be in the next 5 years? Like, and really understand what that is. And you got to meet people where they're at. Like if I'm a leader of an employee or a team member, like how do you like to learn? How do you like to communicate? What's important to you? Like we got to listen to our team members. That's how you're going to retain your folks. You heard a lot about like the, quiet quitting and the great resignation, everybody leaving. And like the labor market continues to be insane. And a lot of areas, there's some industries that are, kind of scaling back, and there's layoffs in like some of the tech industry right now. For example, real estate, I think, is always going to stay hot. I mean, whether you're in residential, you're in multifamily, you're in commercial, you do self-storage stuff. I mean, those are good assets. And even though like residential may decline a little bit, like I think self-storage is a great asset to be in. And I'm not just saying that because I'm going to speak at Ian's event here next month. But I think it's a great advantage because people might be losing their house or moving into an apartment. They're going to need somewhere to put their stuff. So self-storage to me is a really good way to kind of make money passively if you're going to invest in things. That's a good asset class. But you didn't ask me about that. Other things with employees, I think, again, like a lot of small business owners, they don't provide benefits. So if you don't offer medical, dental, vision, life, retirement, those kind of benefits, paid time off, paid holidays, you're not going to get somebody that used to work somewhere else where they had all those things. Or if it's a sales role, someone that makes $100,000 a year and you want to pay them a base salary of $36,000 with some type of upside commission or incentive, they're just not going to do that. So I think you got to think differently. Okay, how can I attract somebody of that caliber that's just a sales like stud or studette or like just a really good salesperson? I think sometimes you got to give them like a 3-month draw and say, I'm going to pay you like an $80,000 salary for the first 3 months while you learn the job, while you learn the industry. If you make more than 80,000 with your commission and the results that you have, we'll pay you the difference, but you at least are going to guarantee yourself like an $80,000 base salary for the first 3 months. And then as they learn the job, they learn the resources and the tools they're getting into, then they can be pared back down to that lower base salary with the higher commission and the higher upside. A lot of companies don't even talk about that. A lot of companies aren't talking about, like what's important to their employees, like financial literacy right now. That's a big thing. Even if I can't offer medical insurance, dental, or vision, I'd be offering some type of financial literacy. It's not taught in the schools, not to get political, Ian, but it's not taught in the schools. People don't know how to balance a checkbook. They don't know where to invest their money. They have no clue. And so people are always stressed about money. That's where the dollar matters more than the experience, that a lot of people have. And I read an article yesterday talking about like if they're like a green company, like where everything's green environment and that stuff, like a lot of the millennials want to work for a green organization. So you have to look at your workforce, and we work in a very unique time right now. There's 4 generations between the boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, and the millennials that are in the workforce right now. And again, this goes back to your leadership question earlier, Ian. Like we got to know what motivates and how those people like to communicate and how they like to work. And that's really going to allow us to, tailor our focus of how we lead those people and how we manage them and where they're going as an organization. So that's a really long-winded answer. Hopefully you guys were following me and everybody watching. I think at the end of the day, it's a multifaceted approach, multifaceted problem. I think, some of it, I think parents have to teach their kids like about hard work and about doing things around the house and, like earning money for doing chores. Like now, a lot of times it's, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to do this. And, Simon Sinek talks about it if you've listened to any of his TED Talks, but like the gold star thing has actually hurt our society a ton, right? Because now, like, think about if your kid's in school and they didn't get an A on a class that they should have gotten an A, the parents are arguing on their behalf, right? Or they didn't get that trophy. They're getting a trophy anyways, even though they didn't deserve it, because people don't know how to fail anymore and how to lose. And so then when we get people that come into the workplace these days, when they don't do something right and they get reprimanded, or there's a coaching, or there's a feedback session where they get written up, they're super upset. They don't know what to do. And then they're just quitting because they don't know how to tailor their emotion or their response around it. So, if I'm a leader in an organization, like I used to have roughly 40 people that reported to me out of roughly 1,200 employees in the segment that I was responsible for, like study emotional intelligence, know about empathy, know about self-reflection, self-awareness, know those core skills, and then evaluate every day, what could I have done differently? And if I'm a leader, like what kind of impact am I making on other people? Like you said it earlier, Jason, like when I hire team members for Fortitude HR Solutions, I don't just take on that employer or team member, I take on their family. And I take that very, seriously. That's my responsibility to make sure that they're always fed, that they're making money, and that they can provide for their families. Not only that, but also to make sure it's a good work environment. I show them how much I appreciate them. I thank them, like write handwritten notes, please and thank you. All that stuff goes a long way. People lose that in the busyness of being an entrepreneur. Take some time, whether you're doing it or your assistant, and focus on your people. The more you focus on your people, in my opinion, the better off that your business is going to be.
Yeah. And there's a time and place to be like, no, this is war zone. Like, I got to talk this certain way or, and there's other times where it's like, all right, there's certain ways I got to act. Right. Like, and not to get that convoluted to say, oh, hey, please, can you do this? Right. Like there's certain times you need to be a leader and say, hey, this needs to get done. Like it's non-negotiable. Like I need it done. Right. And there's a right way to ask for things and the wrong way. And I mean, I know you went off on a good rant there. And you covered a lot of information again, but like all I could think about was what you said, a lot about listening, and being a leader and having I was tying it all together to say, well, if you know your core values and you're listening to your employees and you understand their DISC personality test or the personality type, their DISC personality test, when you hire them, you can kind of put those 3 things together and effectively manage a good team, right? Some people are motivated by money. Some people are motivated by the wanting to be in an environment. Some people are motivated by growth, and tying all these things together, then you create the culture. And when you have a right culture, then you can you attract talent above and beyond, and you can navigate some of these bad or these issues in the workforce right now of trying to recruit people, right? I know when we talked about getting healthcare, I'm like, what do we need healthcare for? we get it from the fire department. And then when we quit the fire department, it was like, holy shit, we need healthcare. And then we're like, wow, that's a recruiting tool. That's a super big benefit that we're offering to our small employee base. And it's crazy how things grow. And that's what it's required to grow as an organization. So,
yeah, and it's not only a recruiting tool, I would say it's also a retention tool, right?
correct.
Because if you don't offer it and you hire somebody and you may pay them a great salary and they may have an opportunity to make a lot with bonuses or incentives, but if you don't offer those benefits and they get married or they have a family or they come up with an illness that they got to now manage and they got to take a medication that they got to pay out of pocket for that's like $600 a month, they're going to go find a job where they don't got to pay $600 a month for their prescription, right? So it becomes a retention tool as well. I think a lot of times employers like, hire, like that's important, but it's also about how do I retain my talent? How do I keep my talent? Because again, when you go to sell your business, if you sell your business in 5 years, if that's your goal, if you lose key employees, your business is no longer as valuable as you thought it was, right? Again, especially when you look at multiples of EBITDA and those kind of things. I did a lot of merger and acquisition work back in the day in corporate America and leading due diligence. And we would always look at, like, when we went to buy a company, like, who do we want to retain? Who's critical to the business? And we would offer them retention bonuses or change of control bonuses to keep those people. So, because we knew if we lost that person, we may lose X number of dollars in revenue because of what they brought to the organization or to the bottom line.
Things that you don't think about as a small business, but it's very, very relevant because it's true. What happens when, Ian, you buy a new property and you're expecting an employee to, you're onboarding somebody or expecting someone to overlap with it. We talk more about kind of the growth and hiring, but the retention, I think, is, just as important on that. I mean, I know even when, pretty much all of our staff that has left for one reason or the other, they help train the next person. Mm-hmm. Which we were fortunate that happened. No one just rolled out and we were stuck doing it. But point being is that's still a pain in the neck, right? Mm-hmm. You're somewhat playing defense instead of offense. So yeah, Scott, this has been great. Anything else that you'd recommend or that we didn't cover that I know we covered a lot that you want to add in?
Yeah, I mean, I think just, again, going back to the retention too, like when you lose somebody, like your turnover cost, people don't calculate this the right way. It could be anywhere from 1.5 to 2 times what you paid somebody, right? When you think about the training dollars, the productivity, the morale, then you maybe have hard recruiting costs like your time, or if you have to hire a third-party recruiter, like what we do some of the recruiting for clients as well. And so those things are costly. So, there's a big impact when you lose an employee. So some people are, like I think we talked about in the beginning of this conversation, like quick just to go fire somebody. It's like, no, how can I work with that person? How can I make them the most effective employee or team member they possibly can be? And I think a lot of that comes from our leadership. How do we lead people? How do we motivate them? Like Ian, I think you said this a little bit, you saw to summarize it, but at the end of the day, like, maybe to one employee, you can say something to the other employee, you got to change your approach or your tone. I think that's really important too. Like knowing your audience. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. I was going to tell a story about the mastermind I was at, but we won't do that. So we'll save that for another conversation.
Fair enough.
So throughout our conversation, you've listed a bunch of books you recommended, and I wrote the majority of them down, and I've read 75% of them, but I just want to outline those real quick. So We got What's Your Why? Leaders Eat Last. I was about to say lenders eat last, but leaders eat.
Hopefully not lenders.
I'm used to writing the word lender. Leaders Eat Last. Who Not How, which Ian and I both read earlier this year, and friggin' awesome.
Good to Great would be another one by Jim Collins. That's
exactly.
a great book. 12 Pillars.
12 Pillars, Jim Rome, the EOS model traction. Yep. So we like to ask all our guests at the end, what's one book or podcast that you recently read or listened to or reread that you highly recommend?
12 Pillars. 12 Pillars.
So 12 Pillars is your number one?
Yeah, it's not just a business book. I think it's a life book about mindset and giving back and what kind of person you want to be. And then if I'm being I guess, a little crazy HR person, not being politically correct, I would say the Bible. So, I mean, like there's I'm a faith-filled guy, and it's given me a lot of direction, especially last year when I almost lost my life, due to some medical illness stuff. So to me, like having a strong why and a purpose, I think that's super important for any entrepreneur, business owner.
Yeah. No, hey, listen, some people read the Bible, some people hold crystals. Some people,
What you
have
gotta
the
do,
universe, whatever it is, man, whatever gets you up and gets you going. Jay, have you read 12 Pillars? Because I have not. I'm literally going to download it.
Add it to our list. Ian and I have our mini book club. Typically, Ian does a lot of driving in the morning. I do a lot of walking in the morning, and it's a good time, like right around sunrise, that we both know that we're available. It's the one time during the day that we can both communicate, because we're vested in a lot of each other's operations in many different ways. So if we're not talking on the phone, we both read books around the same speed. Mostly it's Audible books, but usually within,
I like Audible too.
Usually within like 7 to 10 days, they'll be done. Sometimes quicker.
Except for there's 2 nice long ones, which was Snowball Effect, which was the Warren Buffett one, which was super long, and then Atlas Shrugged we did. Is that last year?
That was last year. That took about 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, that's the best book. I mean, I think that's a really good book. I just gave it out at a talk that I did to about 100 people. I mean, that book right there, you want to talk about core values and life lessons, other than the Bible or whatever you believe in. There's a lot of good life lessons in that bad boy too, especially if you want to create a successful business. And probably should have read it in high school, but I don't know if it would have impacted me the same way it did when it was 2020. It was right around election time is when we were reading it. It was pretty crazy to what was going on in the world.
And still going on in the world.
And still going on.
Yeah, you can listen to that Jim Rohn 12 Pillars on YouTube. It's an hour and 41 minutes.
That's
so, yeah. I walk on the treadmill these days like an hour at a time, and I listen to it 2 days in a row back to back and finished it. So
nice. Scott, now I look forward to having you in town here in about 2 weeks. Super excited for that. Obviously it's a very small event that we're hosting. So only 20 or 25 of my closest friends are going to be there. How can other people, if they want to find out more information about you and what you do or hear from you, where can they find you in the internet or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so fortitudehrsolutions.com. That's the website. They can go on Facebook, Scott Hanis, Hanis. They can find me on LinkedIn, whatever makes it easier for them. So
cool. That's awesome.
Nice. We'll put that in the comments as well of this feed. Cool. Any last words, Scott? We appreciate you coming on.
No, I just really appreciate the time today, Jason and Ian, and thank you for everybody that listened. Just honored to be a guest, and hopefully this was valuable. And that's really, everybody should be doing the same thing. Just offer value and help people. That's what I believe in. So.
Yeah, man. No, it was definitely valuable because I don't normally take notes when we're on the podcast. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And I was writing down books and all kinds of good stuff. So again, super excited to see you in a few weeks. And Jay, I guess take us out of here. I'm Ian from Equity Warehouse, and that's Jason from Hard Money Bankers. See
you guys.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to the Real Estate Reserve Podcast. Do us a favor and like, comment, and share our broadcast. It helps the algorithm and helps us spread the word too. Till next time, thank you for tuning in.